So, we should be streaming. Should be streaming, people. So, coming up in 6 minutes' time, David Kurten, London's Burning, here to talk about his bid for London Mayor, coming up in just a few minutes' time. Hi, David. Can you hear me, sir? David Kurten. Good evening, sir. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm just unmuting myself. Is that better?
Oh, that's probably me. That's probably me. Not to worry. No, I've got you. You're fine. Thank you.
Right.
3-4 minutes, people. 3-4 minutes. Coming up top of the hour. If you're watching an archive version, you might want to fast forward a few minutes. Otherwise, hey, share the show. Thank you. up in just a minute, people. Just a minute. Hey folks, good evening, good morning, good afternoon, good people, and welcome to the Daily Chaos. Ordo ab chao, know what I mean? And now, London's burning. Assembly member David Kurten and fierce critic of City Khan, the current mayor, is running for mayor in the smoke next year. He discusses with me which fires need smothering first. And you know what, I wrote that and I put out the promo to this show before the news, the terrible, horrific news out of Beirut. So I do apologise. Maybe I should have worded that slightly differently. You know what? That's enough of that. David Kurten, good to have you back on the show, sir. Thank you. Last time you were on the show was Daily Brexit, and you were running for UKIP leader. We ended up getting Henry Bolton instead. Just as a brief aside, that didn't go very well for democracy in the UK. No.
Gosh, what a long time ago! It's amazing how time has flown. That was back in 2017 when I was on here, and I know we had a very long chat about everything Brexit and how that was going or it wasn't going at the time, and then the whole UKIP leadership contest and what happened with that. It's very, very sad what's happened to UKIP over the last few years, and I left in January to stand as an independent. So I'm independent now on the London Assembly, and but I'm looking forward though, because the elections are coming up in May 2021 after being postponed for a year, and my goodness, we need a change of mayor. In London, because London is a nightmare at the moment with its current mayor. So, you know, I'm putting all of my energy and efforts into that because we really do need a change. And you know, there are so
many things to talk about tonight. I have so many questions to ask you. It's hard to know where to start, but I guess London deserves that we start there first. What do you see as being the biggest fires that need to be stamped out in London today?
Well, like you say, I don't know where to start really, but the mayor's job it covers two main things. He's got to run the transport system, and he's also the police and crime commissioner. So he's supposed to look after policing and oversee that and make sure that crime levels continue going down. He's supposed to keep London safe That's the job of the mayor. But crime has been going up and up and up in London over the last 4 years, violent crime in particular. It's been going up in other parts of the country too, that's true, but last year it started to go down in the rest of England and Wales, but carried on going up in London. So something different is happening in London. He's always used that as an excuse, but he can't use that as an excuse anymore. And, you know, another assembly member questioned him, it was about a year ago, on whether he thought that he'd done a good job in keeping London safe. And he said, yes, I have. And he's completely out of touch with reality, because London isn't safe anymore. It used to have a wonderful reputation as being a metropolis, a global city where you could walk around safely. It was a pleasant place to live. You know, you didn't have to fear going out at night, but that's changed, or even in the daytime. A lot of crime, violent crime, happens 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the afternoon in London at the moment. So, you know, there's no time of day. There's no place where you're not under threat. And it's a terrible, terrible thing.
I agree. I remember when London was regarded as very safe compared to, say, New York back in the 80s. And then New York seemed to get cleaned up a bit. It's gone way down since then, as we know, particularly recently. What are the statistics now, the crime stats in London? What are we talking about? What sort of level of just untoward crime?
I think, you know, the homicide rate last year, there were about 150 homicides in London, which was up from it was under 100 in 2014-15. So it's gone up by about 50%. It's on course to, you know, meet that this year, even though there was the COVID lockdown. So actually crime levels dropped quite dramatically in April and May because of the lockdown. That was all over the country. I think it was all over the world. But now they've shot up again in June and July. And you know, you had at the weekend 5 people being stabbed, and, you know, in various incidents around London after these paramilitaries went marching through the streets of Brixton. Someone was firing off a semi-automatic rifle in Brixton afterwards, and stabbings and shootings in other parts of London as well. So these things are happening on a weekly basis now, if not a daily basis. And if it's not an actual homicide, stabbings up. I think rape is up about 40% since Sadiq Khan took office over the last 4 years, and so on. And knife crime is up by a similar amount, about 40%, and so on. So these are things that have got to get tackled. And there's just been no leadership, I think. There's been political correctness across the board from Sadiq Khan. What I call the fake conservatives in government with Theresa May was pretty much on the same page. You know, you had 2015 to 2018, you know, Theresa May and Sadiq Khan both opposed to stop and search, both, you know, pushing this narrative that stop and search is racist and therefore we shouldn't do it, or we should cut it. But actually, a lot of crime in London is black on black crime, black on black violence, a significant amount. And so you've got to target the groups that are the main perpetrators, who are also happen to be the same group as some of the main victims. So you need to do more stop and search. We need to get away from all the politically correct narratives in policing, you know, as well as other areas of society, because you've got to allow the police to do their jobs and keep London and Londoners safe. You know, and that's the same all over the country in other police forces as well. Political correctness is endemic in many, many police forces, and it's just a disaster.
But in London particularly, and with the Met, and Cressida Dick, she does seem a very political operator. I heard her on Radio 4, the Today programme, one day talking about the detrimental effect of Brexit, for example. And I was wondering, what on earth has a police constable, chief constable, got to do with this subject when they should be surely policing? Have we lost the police force in London? How can we regain a police force which will respect, for example, our veterans who are trying to protect the cenotaph and refusing to give elderly veterans water while giving water at the same event to members of BLM, Black Lives Matter, and Antifa, which arguably is a very political and racist organization. The police seems to have taken far too politically correct a knee here, as opposed to acting on an even keel. How can that be corrected?
Well, it comes from the very top. It comes from Sadiq Khan, and it comes from Cressida Dick, who I mean, on a personal level, Cressida Dick is a very nice person, on a one-to-one basis, but her politics are awful. And the political correctness that she emanates from her throughout the police force is a disaster. You've got a lot of really good police officers in the rank and file, and that quietly some of them say to me, it's never ever been so tough as it is now. And my heart goes out to them, because they want to do a good job. They want to catch criminals and they lock them up, most of them. Very, very good policemen in the rank and file. But you've got people who rise to the top because the system allows people who are all on this equality, diversity and inclusion train and narrative to get to the top. So you've got people at the top there, Khan and Cressida Dick, who are on that kind of page. And so the people that are politically similar to them get promoted into the positions. You've got Neil Basu is up there as the deputy, I think he's counter-terrorism officer, and would be all on the sort of equality train, what I call the inequality sort of train, where you've got the whole hate crime narrative, where this goes with the whole Black Lives Matter thing. You've got a Black Lives Matter demonstration, they're all breaking the coronavirus regulations and nothing seems to get done about them. But then you have other people going up to defend the cenotaph or to defend Winston Churchill's statue, and they get pummeled in the media. They get all smeared as nasty, far-right, racist, bigots, terrible. I mean, there were some people there who were really like that, but I think there were also veterans. There were really decent people who were concerned about the vandalism of the statues and the covering up of Winston Churchill statues, and they have a right to protest, and largely peaceful. But the narratives and that are coming out and the way that the different groups are treated is very plain for everybody to see. And I went up to observe all of these demonstrations that were going on week after week after week, and I did notice a very big difference in the way that they were policed there. And I went to see a Black Lives Matter demo in Hyde Park. It wasn't supposed to happen, and you had community liaison officers from the police force just merrily going round. I mean, one of them came up to me, thought I was a BLM supporter, and said, "Oh, how are you doing? Nice." And he had a nice chat to me, and he was all trying to make me feel welcome and so on. When actually, if I'd have been in another demonstration for a different thing, I'd have probably been loaded into the back of a van. So you've got it's coming from the top, and there's an inconsistency in how people are treated, and it's wrong, because everyone should be equal under the law, and that is gone. It's gone.
Yes, it appears. Looking, you mentioned the FFF movement, which I understand is a limited company or something. They look like a bunch of black-clad paramilitaries to me, marching through the streets, doing their semi-military drills or what have you, but peculiar spectacle, really. They were allowed to do that, despite the fact that they were threatening in some of the things that they were saying, and intimidating, at least. Maybe that's a fairer word. I thought that was against the law, that kind of uniformed Black Panther type paramilitary Oswald Mosley type stuff.
It is. It is. I mean, there's. I didn't know. I mean, we've all found this out. There's the 1936 Public Order Act, which was there, implemented specifically to stop the fascists in the 1930s from wearing paramilitary uniforms and parading through the streets. And then the very same day, I think, Sadiq Khan tweeted out, "You're not allowed to gather in groups of more than 6 people." I mean, I think that's inaccurate. Actually, you're allowed to going slightly more than that, but he was saying that. But then you've got hundreds of people on the streets, and in Brixton you've got dozens of people wearing these paramilitary uniforms, and nothing is done about it. They're just allowed to carry on breaking the law in 2 different ways. And so, when people see this, you question what on earth is happening. There's other marches which get designated as something else. The police slap a Public Order Act, Section 13 or Section 14 notice on straight away. Mm-hmm. Why wasn't that done with these? Why isn't that ever done for Black Lives Matter demonstrations? Why isn't it done for Extinction Rebellion, who were on the streets earlier this year? We've forgotten that, but they were causing chaos back in February and March with a week-long demonstration in Trafalgar Square, stopping the traffic. Nothing was done to stop them. So it seems that if you are if Sadiq Khan supports your political cause, you can get away with doing whatever you like. But if he doesn't support your political cause, you will be, smeared, and they will come down on you like a ton of bricks. So there's a complete inconsistency in the way that the policing is done, and that's got to stop.
I had Simon Bean pop on the show a couple of times in the last few weeks, but the first time 3 weeks ago or so, he was telling me directly off the back of the cenotaph, trying to protect it, how the police marched them into the area of the cenotaph. And then when they got there, the police turned around and said, "If you don't leave this area, we will charge you under terrorist offences." I think it's Section 13, no? And yet then we see this paramilitary-looking force the other day on London streets, and they're being heralded by the police. How can this policing culture, which apparently has gone so awry, and as you say, 2-tier policing, how can that be corrected, really?
People have got to start voting in the right way. I mean, London is it's a very difficult situation in a way, but, I'm standing for mayor. I'll also be standing for the assembly elections as well. I mean, it's a difficult ask to try to remove Sadiq Khan, because London has changed so much in terms of demographics, and, that he won last time. He's well ahead in the polls this time, but, I've got to be in it to win it. So I will do everything I can to beat him and then restore some sanity into London. But, if people vote for him in again, then we got another 4 years of the same. But, when it comes to what I call the fake Conservative Party, they are worse, because they pretend to be conservative every time in an election. We're going to do this, we're going to cut immigration, we're going to have law and order, we're going to have a full Brexit, we're all these things that they promise, going to protect the green belt. They get in, and straight away then they start acting like Blairites. So what have we got now? We've got boats coming across the channel, 100, 200 people a day coming over. There's no stop to immigration. We've got people there supporting taking a knee to Black Lives Matter. You've got them supporting LGBT sex education lessons in primary schools coming up, and you've got no fault divorce, you've got DIY abortions, you've got them, they were dragged kicking and screaming into abandoning Huawei and the 5G network coming up, and still that's not going to happen until 2027. So there's all of these things which are going on which are not conservative whatsoever. So we've got a big problem in politics in this country, because people trust the Conservative Party because, a lot of people don't think about it too much. You vote for every 4 or 5 years, whatever. We have more votes actually in the last 5 years or so, but still every couple of years. And then people just want to vote and then get on with their lives. They don't want to spend lots and lots of time thinking about politics. You just want to live your life and trust the government's going to govern the country well and do what they say they're going to do, and you can get on and you can live your life and go about your business. But that's not what's happened. And I think people need to wake up and realize the Conservative Party is damaging this country just as much as the Labour Party would do, just as much as Blair would do, just as much as Corbyn would do, maybe in a slower way, but they are damaging this country, and they are not protecting the people. They're not keeping people safe. They're not cutting immigration. They're not investing in young people. They're not being financially responsible. They're mounting up debt, which is going to be, an economic disaster for all of us for generations if we're not careful. And they are badly governing this country. We need an alternative to them. We need a truly conservative party that is actually going to do proper conservative things and keep people safe. And that's what we need. There were the last election. You had obviously the Brexit Party was standing on a single issue, which was get out of the European Union, but then they pulled half of their candidates, so you didn't have much of an alternative.
That's right.
In half the seats. But next time, we need another alternative, and I'm seriously thinking about doing something myself along those lines.
Are you? Because
I am. I'm not making any announcement at the moment, but it's something I've been thinking about. You might have, if you follow me on Twitter, I've mentioned it 2 or 3 times. We need something, and I'm thinking about something. So, if there is nothing, then
you're a member of the Brexit Alliance still, off the back of UKIP. You're a member of the Brexit Alliance. Tell us briefly, please, what that constitutes.
It's not a political party, it's a group in the London Assembly. So the two of us, myself and Peter Whittle, were both elected with UKIP in 2016. That's when UKIP was very different to what it is today. It was big, it was going somewhere, it was looking like it might break the mold of British politics. And I was very, very hopeful that it would. But then it went wrong in so many ways, thing after thing after thing for 3 or 4 years. And so Peter Whittle left, I left UKIP, but we are, both him and I, are independents, but we stayed as a group in the London Assembly so we can work together. So we called it the Brexit Alliance Group. It's not a party, it's just it only exists in the London Assembly. Really, but it's basically we stayed believing in the same kind of policies as UKIP and the Brexit Party, but we weren't actually members of representing either in the London Assembly.
So Brexit is still very much a concern for you, if you like, in the running order of priorities. How big is Brexit for you, and in your opinion, for the country? And why? Why should people be thinking still about Brexit? Or is the Prime Minister right that we shouldn't be talking about Brexit anymore?
We should be talking about it because we don't have Brexit. We've got Brexit in name only, which is what we had on the 31st of January. And there was celebrations and it was nice, but it was just a symbolic event because, again, all that happened is we withdrew our MEPs and our commissioner. They came back. But we're still in the single market, we're still in the customs union, we're still in the European Court of Justice, we're still in the common fisheries policy, we're still in PESCO and the European defence architecture, the common agricultural policy. We're still in all of the organisational structure of the EU. And we're still required to obey all of the EU's directives, regulations and rulings, and I think people need to realise that. I mean, I've said, many, many times, we are now in an 11-month period of vassalage, and we are, and we won't be out of that until the end of the year, and that's only if we come out with no deal, and they don't do something stupid and sign us up to even more than what they signed us up to when we left in name only on the 31st of January. So really, we've got to come out fully, I think, without giving anything else away, regain our sovereignty in full, and then we can talk about having a mutually beneficial trade deal. You know, it would be very easy to have a trade deal where we have zero tariffs and zero quotas, but we don't have to obey each other's laws. I mean, we wouldn't expect Germany to obey our laws. So why should we obey the laws that come from Brussels? It's very, very simple, and that could be done very, very easily. But you know, it's bigger than that. To be honest, Ollie.
Okay. I just want to. I want to press you. Hold that thought, please. But I do want to press you because David Frost, chief negotiator for the UK in this Brexit trade deal thing, he says all the right things. No.
Yeah, he does, and he sounds good, and he sounds much better than who was it, Tim Robbins, the guy that Theresa
Olly
May
Robbins,
had as chief
my
negotiator.
namesake.
So he's far, far better. And you know, I mean, I think Boris has been pretty awful on just about everything, but the one thing that he does seem to be still on track on, and I hope it stays this way, is Brexit. It does still seem to be that they're making the right noises about we will leave with no deal. You know, if we're not going to compromise on that, if that's what we have to do. You know, I don't know if they'll do something dreadful at the last minute, but it does sound as though the one thing that they might actually do is actually come out fully and properly at the end of the year. Because that was the one thing that people voted for Boris for. I think a lot of people, they didn't vote for Boris. They didn't vote for the Tories. They voted for Brexit. You know, you had 2 or 3 million people in the North and the Midlands who lent the Tories their vote. And they were voting to get Brexit done. You know.
How much do you think that Boris is the Brexiteer? And how much do you think that Donald Trump is the Brexiteer? And how might the British position with regards Brexit versus Brino, if you like, change if Joe Biden becomes president of the United States?
You know, I mean, if we have Joe Biden in as president, I think all of the hopes and the we have for freedom, both, you know, around the world, will be, you know, shot away in many senses, because he's just going to totally change everything around in the United States and move towards global socialism. So in a way, it won't really matter, because, you know, if you've got the leading country in the Western world, in the free world, is going down the route of serfdom and socialism and perhaps towards communism, you know, it's almost irrelevant what happens here, to be honest. So, I mean, I really hope and pray that Donald Trump gets a second term, because in 2016, it was a wonderful year for freedom. We had Brexit, the referendum vote, and then Donald Trump won the election. And we've had 4 years where you've seen the viciousness with which the people who want to overturn Brexit and impeach Trump have like thrown everything at those two things, both in this country and in the United States. You know, they're not taking, you know, democracy. They're enemies of democracy because they're not accepting the result. You saw we had 4 years in this country of the SNP, the Labour, the Lib Dems, and some of the Tories trying to overturn democracy. And you have the same in America. The Democrats, they're not really democratic. It's really ironic, their name, isn't it? Trying to get rid of Donald Trump. So their program is to put in place economic socialism, control, cultural Marxism, and destroy freedom in the United States. And that will emanate all through the world. So, you know, we need Donald Trump back in the White House, you know, and then we need Brexit in this country. But what I was going to allude to,
please,
as well before, is it's wider than just Brexit. I mean, what I would say is we need to still have as our goal is national sovereignty. And coming out of the EU is just the first step to having national sovereignty. But there's, when we're out of it, what's coming to view now is that there's lots and lots of global, pacts and arrangements and treaties and compacts and organizations that we've signed up to that impinge on our sovereignty nearly as much or together just as much as the EU. So, we're in the UN Global Migration Compact. We're in the Barcelona Declaration, the Marrakesh Declaration, which commit us to mass rapid immigration, which we can't control. We're in the World Health Organization, which takes control of our health policy. With this whole COVID thing, why are we not getting hydroxychloroquine and zinc and azithromycin, which has been shown in many, many studies to work? Why are they trying to push through a vaccine which doesn't exist yet and may well be very, very unsafe? There's other things like the Paris Climate Agreement, where we don't have freedom over our energy policy, our environment policy, and maybe the biggest one is Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, which comes from the United Nations, and the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, which is really a blueprint for global socialist government. You might not actually see it. It's like the EU. It would like the institutions of the nations remain, but the substance will be sucked out and hollowed out. So you don't actually realize that things are happening and someone else is taking control until it's too late and the whole thing just collapses. But that's what the EU wanted to do, and in many senses you've got the UN is trying to do that as well through all of it, many different organizations that it has. And so we need to realize what is now trying to erode our national sovereignty, and we need to fight for it. And the EU is just the first stage in doing that. Unfortunately, right. I wish it was over, but it's not. It's just the beginning.
David, you're a remarkable politician, because, the media, they must dub you a conspiracy theorist. Everything you've just said is fact, documented fact. But you put that kind of stuff on Facebook and you will get a ban or a jailing. And in fact, I got a jailing for sharing a tweet of yours yesterday.
Oh, really? What's it? I can't believe it.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Well, it was the 1936 Act outlawing paramilitaries on the streets. And that was your tweet. And I shared it. At first, I couldn't share it directly because it came up with a message from Facebook saying, you can't share this because we've had reports that it is somehow abusive. And so I copied it and pasted it, via Photoshop or whatever. And then I got a jailing and a group jailing as well.
I can't believe it, honestly. It's a fact. Yeah. It's an act. It's part of the law. It's in the Hansard. It's it's stuffed away on the shelves of the Houses of Parliament, and you are banned. Your free speech is taken away from you for just saying something which is true. This is. It's incredible to me. But what I find astounding is that you got a jailing or a banning for a little bit, but I didn't. It seems the last couple of years I've had a few shadow bans. I know, because there's been various times where my followers have gone up and then they've stopped and then they've gone down, and for a couple of months, and then they've gone up again and then they've stopped and it's gone down. So something's happened with their algorithms that my traffic is not going anywhere. I got a couple of bans from Facebook for transgender tweets. Where there was
well, you pointed out that the dictionary says there are two genders.
Yeah. But I'm sorry you got a ban because I didn't.
It's all right. It's a common problem around these parts. I'm on a constant shadow ban. They completely ruined the old Daily Brexit page, Facebook. And it's just incredible. Which brings me to my next question to you, because whilst all these individual points and policies, be it from the UN or globalists, basically, are all concerning, and I'd like to ask you about one or two of them individually in a second. I do wonder whether they are the underpinning problem of our time, or else actually that it is this fake stream media that Donald Trump has highlighted, in my opinion, more than anything else in his presidency, more importantly than anything else, combined with social media now, which is denying us a balanced debate on the issues of our time. What are these politicians the bigger problem, or is the fact that their policies are not being held to account and we're not allowed to question them the bigger problem, in your opinion?
They're all working together. You've got politicians, half of them are stupid, half of them are just meat on a seat. Basically, they're lobby fodder. They sit there, they do what they're told, they take the check, and then they go home and they have a nice life, no problem. They just, without thinking, basically, they might as well not be there. You might as well replace them with robots, half of them. There are some decent politicians who have gone in, because they want to make a difference, or they believe in freedom and so on. But I think they are the minority. But then you do have some, who are signed up to the program, who believe in transforming the world, reshaping the world, reimagining the world, who, this is some of the language they use, this kind of common purpose language. Everything is changed, invent new words for things, and, use language in a way which is like a tool to advance their agenda. For example, the whole thing of Black Lives Matter is a very, very powerful phrase, because you agree with the phrase. Of course, Black Lives Matter.
All lives matter.
Exactly.
Think.
But I wouldn't disagree that Black Lives Matter. They do, of course. White lives matter. Chinese lives matter. Black lives matter. But
if you say white lives matter, you're branded a racist. And
yeah, well, this is the cultural Marxism, isn't it? So the cultural Marxist, neo-Marxist view of the world is that there are privileged classes and there are classes of victims, and so the victims must take control of society from the privileged class. The privileged class who are the white, if you're white or you're male or you're heterosexual or you're Christian or something else, you must be put down because you have inherent privilege, and that's not fair. So they've got to put obstacles in your way, and then they've got to redistribute wealth to the class, which is a class of victims. And also there's the idea of corrective justice, where white people need to be given stiffer sentences for the same crime, but you might have a migrant or a black person shouldn't receive the same kind of sentence because they're victims of society. This totally goes against and flies in the face of our understanding of common law, where everyone should be treated equally under the law, and you're innocent until you're proven guilty, and everyone has the right to a trial by jury with 12 men or women who are chosen at random from society, who can make an impartial judgment. All of these things are going out of the window because of cultural Marxist ideology, and it's so wrong. And people see, I think a lot of people feel and understand there's something very, very wrong with society and what's happening and where it's going, but they don't understand, what's behind it. But that's what it is, and it's been sort of a cancer that's been eating away at our society for decades and decades. And it comes from Alinsky and the Frankfurt School back in the 1920s, and then the New Left. You got Marcuse and Rudi Dutschke and so on, and then postmodernists afterwards have progressed this kind of ideology and thinking and got into the institutions to infiltrate and corrode them from within. And that's what's happened all over the Western world. And people are starting to wake up to this and to actually understand what's going on. But, you do wonder, is it too late? Is it too late now? Because the corrosion has just got so deep and so big.
Yeah.
It's like a car that's rusting away under the surface. The metals are eroding. The paint is still there, and then suddenly the paint cracks, and then you just see a big gaping hole underneath. I mean, I hope it's not too late to change it around and do something about it. But the first thing is to wake people up and to get people to understand this is what's going on, and it's been going on. In education, in policing, in the judiciary, in the media, in politics, and a lot of the laws that came in, particularly under Tony Blair, the Human Rights Act and the Equalities Act, have actually put in place a legal framework for cultural Marxism to become, part of the legal fabric of the country, and then they need to be reversed. That would be one of the first things needs to be done with a new truly conservative government, is to rip up all of the stuff that Tony Blair did and disband all of the quangos that he formed, and actually just get back to the simple understanding that what we had is that people are equal under the law, and treat people equally as such without assigning people characteristics and looking at them, all the time as, oh, you're black, you're gay, you're straight, you're white, therefore we treat you like this and we treat you like this, and you should think that and you should think that. I mean, it's just madness in a way.
Education matters, hey David.
Mm-hmm.
Family values matter,
yeah,
I guess.
Absolutely.
And mutual respect matters.
Yes. Yes.
You, sir, are a breath of fresh air in political circles.
Thank you.
I bet Sadiq Khan doesn't like you at all. Do you ever share a cocktail evening together and have a nice chat, or is the animosity?
I've never shared a cocktail with Sadiq Khan. I've never even been in the same picture as Sadiq Khan. But I mean, to be honest with you, I mean, there are times where he's amenable. We can have a chat, just a quick chat. It's okay. I mean, I don't hate him personally. Whatever. I mean, we can have a conversation. But when we're in the chamber, obviously his politics are so awful. It's just dreadful. And he's always virtue signaling about these kind of woke narratives, and he goes on and on about this, woke things. The whole sort of green climate alarmism agenda is another thing which is very much affecting transport. That's a whole other issue from police and crime. But a couple of months ago, I think I had my best question session with Sadiq Khan, where he actually decided he was going to support Black Lives Matter, and supporting police officers taking a knee and all of this thing, and getting right on the narrative of systemic injustice. And I asked him, do you support Black Lives Matter? Do you support their aims, which are to defund the police? And he didn't seem to actually realize that this is what they wanted to do. And I said, do you support smashing capitalism? Do you support disrupting the nuclear family? And every time he said, well, he didn't really know what to say. But obviously he'd never really understood that this was the aims of the group. It was a Marxist organization. But he actually agreed with me in the end. He couldn't say that. I think it was astounding that you have got the mayor of London, who's in charge of the police, supporting an organisation that wants to defund the police. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And he didn't even know. He didn't even seem to know that this is what they were about.
He's not.
But I put him right on that. And
he's not actually a Marxist, though, is he? I mean, it seems to me that he and his ilk are, if you like, faux Marxists, but in reality, globalist fascists.
Yeah, I don't know what I would call him as such, but I mean, I don't think he's a Marxist in terms of original economic Marxism. That kind of total sort of controlled economy as such. Mm-hmm. But I mean, he's definitely a globalist. He supported Hillary Clinton openly in the American elections, sort of commenting on the 2016 election. He supports the EU, he supports the UN, all of the sort of the World Health Organization, all those programs, the whole green agenda. And all of those things are killing freedom. And I don't know whether why he does that. I mean, I don't know what goes on in his mind, but he seems he's one of the main people who is pushing this agenda in the country, and a lot of people just go along with it because they don't know how to oppose the very, very clever way that they argue and push things. I mean, the whole green agenda. It's very hard to argue about looking after the environment. I mean, that's how it's framed. But the whole green agenda is about, you've got now banning petrol and diesel cars from 2030 is coming into the frame. That's what they want to do. And,
after they told us we all had to buy them.
yeah, right. So I mean, this is going to take away freedom. It's going to stop people from traveling around. And one of the things that we got at the moment, which hopefully is temporary, is there's hardly any flights going anywhere. So one thing the Agenda 2030 wants to do, the whole green agenda, is to limit people's flights. So people only can have one flight a year, and maybe that's if you're good. If you bring in some kind of Chinese style social credit system, you can take your annual flight, and if you're not good, you won't be able to take it. I mean, this is what people want to bring in, and he hasn't said that specifically, but this is the sort of thing that's coming down the line. But I think Sadiq Khan will say whatever suits Sadiq Khan. I think at the end of the day, he's about himself. I mean, he's about puffing himself up and talking himself up, and he'll say whatever he needs to say to get his audience on side. He's got his audience. He knows
political
whose votes are.
opportunist.
Yeah, exactly. I think he'll say anything he would say to get some votes and to
but with very much a globalist agenda, and a man who the day after the EU referendum, when we voted to leave, and very possibly voted far more widely to leave than was admitted, for all we know, he came out and he said, you know what, I think that London needs to look at becoming a city-state, didn't he?
It's completely ridiculous. I mean, it's an utterly ridiculous thing to say, but it gets them a headline. This is the sort of Blairite media board strategy, that every day they'd make an announcement, however ridiculous it was, to get a media story. And
how is that good, though? How can that be good? But England and Britain and the UK's capital city to be standing against the rest of the kingdom.
Yeah, it's London was the only part of England and Wales that voted to stay in the EU, but it wasn't by as much as they thought. I mean, you still got 40% of London voted to leave the EU. People thought it was going to be 70-30, but it was actually 60-40. But for 4 years I've watched as they've tried to perpetuate this narrative, this propaganda that London's different, that London should have, some kind of London visa, some kind of separate government. He should have more power for himself over London, and he's tried to use that for his political ends and his political agenda. But now we've actually, come out in name only and so on. That's kind of seems to have died away. But there's all these other narratives that these mentions all the time. There's the whole hate crime narrative, there's the green agenda, there's the hate speech and all these kind of things that he's all over all the time.
Do you think that he is merely somehow playing to the choir of a demographically very different part of the UK in London, or is he actually racist against the English and the British even? Because I see you, for example, with your Union Jack behind you, and I widened the frame on the picture to get that in, because it's good to see. When I mentioned this to you, when you kindly came on to do a quick audio video test earlier this evening, you said that people had called you a racist for having that flag. Scotland has the Saltaire, do they not, outside Holyrood, and Northern Ireland similarly, and Wales with their flag outside their assembly. Why? What is the justification for our capital city's City Hall not to be flying the Union Jack and the English flag as well, side by side?
Yeah, for what was it, 3.5 years outside City Hall from when Sadiq Khan came in, he put up the EU flag. You did have a Union Jack outside as well. You did have a Union flag, but the EU flag was there, and then there was another one that just had said London is open on it. You know, I would have the Union flag, the English flag, and then you'd have some flag for London. You know, I've used the old sort of London County flag, which is actually very nice. It's not official anymore, but I think, you know, you could put that up, you know, to represent London. Those are the three flags that should be flying outside City Hall, not the EU flag. But I don't think he's ever put up an English flag. I mean, why not? London is the capital of England, as well as the capital of the United Kingdom. So you should have an English flag up there. And I have mentioned it a couple of times in City Hall, and you know, I've been laughed at with derision, even from some of the Conservatives. One in particular, not all of them, but there's one of them that actually just is very patronising and sarcastic about putting up the English flag as well. And so, you know, it's all around you. And City Hall is like, it's like another world. It's like walking into enemy territory. It's like, you know, walking through treacle, and because, you know, you've got such craziness in the way people think there. And, you know, people will go on about diversity all the time, diversity of this, race, gender, whatever, 100 genders, but there's no diversity of thought. Everyone thinks the same stale, so-called progressive liberal things, and then if I say something different, it's like, oh, what? How dare you say that? You know, I've been called all kinds of things in the chamber and outside on Twitter and social media and so on. So just for having what would be the majority opinion, I think the silent majority opinion, out, you know, in the wider nation. But in London, especially City Hall, is like its own little world, its own little bubble that is really at odds with the rest of the country as a whole, I think.
I have to say, I find it quite frightening. You touched on the Franklin School earlier, and I almost expected you to mention Kurten. I do wonder if we are seeing a cultural genocide being perpetrated across Europe and in the UK by people like Sadiq Khan, puppets to the highest bidder, who seem intent on divide rule and God knows what down the road. What you suggested, you intimated at a bigger agenda. What is it?
Well, I mean, you know, again, you mentioned Sadiq Khan, and he's a cheerleader for diversity. He's always on about diversity, and you've got City Hall, you've got pictures of sort of black people and
but it isn't diversity, really, is it? That's the word they use, but actually it equates to division.
Yeah, there's never any celebration of, you know, indigenous British culture. You know, he would talk about, we need a museum of slavery to talk about our terrible past. But, you know, we have a wonderful, glorious past in this country. That's never mentioned by Sadiq Khan. I mean, we've never mentioned William Wilberforce, for example, who helped to abolish slavery, us defeating the Nazis in the Second World War, and so on. The Glorious Revolution, common law, you know, the religious freedom and tolerance and Enlightenment values that come from this country, which are so fantastic. You know, this country's got so much to be proud of. But that's not, you know, what I hear from Sadiq Khan. In fact, the opposite. But when you're talking about change in demographics of Britain, and the demographics are changing, there's no question. They have been changing dramatically since Tony Blair came in 1997. And again, you have to look and see who's doing it. So at the moment, yes, Sadiq Khan is a cheerleader for it, but he's not the one who's doing it. It's the Conservative Party that's doing it. They've been in power for 10 years. And, you know, however bad Blair was, and yes, immigration from Eastern Europe, rocketed up in 2004 or whatever, and you had like millions of people coming in from Eastern Europe. Under Cameron and May, and now Boris Johnson, you've got double the rate of net immigration, not just from the EU, but from all over the world. And they're doing nothing to stop it. And you've got people coming across the Channel, 20 boats a day. The French Coast Guard is taking them to the middle, and then the English Border Force is picking them up, and then they're ending up in hotels all over the country, getting nice 4-star rooms, and bed and breakfast, and Serco is getting money for this, and I think other companies are getting money. It's costing us, the British taxpayer, are paying for it. Billions of pounds a year are paying for the demographic change which is going on in this country. And it's not just here, it's happening all over. It's happening in the USA, although President Trump has stopped it a little bit, which is a good thing. But Angela Merkel opened up the doors to Germany in 2015, completely changed and transformed Germany. Sweden's been doing it for much longer, Netherlands and Belgium too, France, and so on. Everywhere it would seem, except Poland and Hungary and the Visegrad countries in Eastern Europe, where there isn't a big change in migration. But all over Western Europe, this is happening. And it's being aided and abetted by our governments, and it's against what the people want. And the people who are doing it and allowing it to happen don't feel the effects of it. Because the effects of this are felt in working class towns, in poorer areas. Where are people going to go if they come to the country and they're sort of a migrant and they just come? They come
not Belgravia.
Yeah, no, of course not. They get put in the cheapest, poorest areas. Dewsbury and Blackburn and Oldham and Rochdale, Rotherham. This is where they go. So it's the working class communities where house prices are cheaper, so it's cheaper to put people up there. They're the places that they go. It doesn't affect Theresa May, it doesn't affect Boris Johnson, his home in Oxfordshire, whatever. They don't get affected at all. So they think, oh, this is wonderful. It's great. My mate's businesses, they get lots of cheap labour, or and we get a nice cheap nanny, for our home, whatever. But they don't experience any of the negative effects of this that millions of other people are experiencing, and it just goes on and on and on. You mentioned Coudenhove-Kalergi. I've read his book, a 1922 book called Practical Idealism. I can't find it in English anywhere, to be honest. I don't think it's actually been translated into English. And it's one of these.
Did you read it in German?
Yeah, I read it in German. So
well done.
Praktische Idealismus, yes. And there are some very bad translations of it going around, which kind of say they're not translated correctly. I've seen some of the things. But it does say things like we will change the diversity of nations into a diversity of individuals. So he's sort of thinking about the future. He was in the head of the pan-European movement back in the 20s and 30s and the interwar period. So he was the first winner of the Charlemagne Prize in 1936, which is given to the person who does the most for European integration. And then
Ted Heath won it
afterwards, but then so did Tony Blair won that prize afterwards.
Did he?
It's given out by the EU to I think every 2 years. But Coudenhove-Kalergi was the first winner of the Charlemagne Prize. So I've read the book, and it does talk about. It says in the distant future, when the European peoples in today's sense of the word will have disappeared, they'll be replaced with, excuse my language here, Eurasian Negroids. Okay, that's 1922. That's the sort of Eurasiatische Negroid, or whatever, German word. So it sort of makes the assumption, it's not really so much of a plan, but an assumption that with mass migration happening in the future, Everyone will just be mixed up together, and there won't be any sort of nations as they are. It was 1920s. There wouldn't be nations with different characteristics and diversity between nations as there are then, and still is a little bit today. Everyone would just be sort of mixed up, and everyone would be like a Eurasian Negroid in the 1920s language of Kurten. That's what he assumes the future would be like.
It sounds a bit.
I'm loath to say it's a plan so much as to like an assumption that this would happen, but not, he wasn't against it. He thought that was actually a good thing. He actually considered that would be a good thing, because people would have different characteristics of different peoples within them. That's what he thought, but I don't think that's actually how it's working out.
It just sounds a bit dull, David. I mean, when I go abroad on holiday or something, I want to see the locals and the local culture. I don't think that's racist. In fact, I think that's loving. And I just wonder if clearly the globalists, if you like, the United Nations, you mentioned Agenda 2030, for example, they are clearly set on this course with, you mentioned the UN Migration Compact, for example. It doesn't seem to matter what the individual peoples do of whatever country around the world. The politicians are hell-bent on ignoring them. And the UN Migration Compact is a very good example. I wonder how many people, what percentage of people do you think in the UK actually know what we're referring to?
I think probably 1% or fewer, to be honest. I mean, because it was just done by Theresa May. She just went over to Marrakesh and signed it. I think it was back at the end of 2018. And,
Can you just give us a précis? Can you just give us a brief précis on what it is to make sure that people are clear?
Well, first of all, there was the Barcelona Declaration. That was 1995, and that was to aid free movement and cooperation between the EU, countries in the Middle East and North Africa. Then there was the Marrakesh Declaration. That was later. That was the Marrakesh Declaration and the UN Global Compact on Migration, signed in the same year, 2018. So the Marrakesh Declaration, I think, was earlier, it was May or something, and that was it was the same as the Barcelona Declaration, but it was between the EU and West and Central Africa. So it was like Mauritania, Nigeria, Benin, Cameroon, Congo, those kind of countries, rather than the Algeria, Egypt, Libya, which was the Barcelona Declaration. But the UN Global Compact was a global agreement. So it was like, it almost made the Barcelona and Marrakesh declarations irrelevant, because it was to aid a normalized migration between all countries of the world, and legalize routes and make it easier for people to come, regularize migration, which was the language they used. And also it wanted to try to bring in penalties for people who spoke against it, who were against the narrative. It was very worrying, sort of like new class of hate speech you wanted to try and bring in, with the agreement. So most countries in the world signed up to it, without the knowledge of anyone in this country, hardly at all. And this is the kind of thing that it's a global agreement that takes away our sovereignty to a large extent, and no one's been asked. Something like that needs a referendum before it's imposed. If you say to the people, I'm thinking of signing this global treaty, it's going to make migration from everywhere in the world easier, you're going to have tens or hundreds of thousands more migrants every year coming from every corner of the world. Do you want this? Do you want us to sign? Ask the people. And the people will probably say an emphatic no, go away. But if that's what the people want, fine. Let's implement it. But if it's not what the people want, then you shouldn't make this kind of global agreement which undermines democracy or circumvents democracy, goes around it, by no one's given a chance to vote for it. No one's even made aware of it unless you're looking very carefully at what's going on. And you're reading sort of alternative media or looking at Twitter or something. You might find out about it by chance. So there's all these kind of agreements that have been made, which we talked about earlier, Paris Agreement and Agenda 21 and
David,
Istanbul Convention.
Are we racist? Talking about this sort of thing. Well, I suppose if you studied that question on a philosophical basis, you could argue that everybody is prejudiced. Actually, I suppose you could, and that's another. But in terms of overtness and taking away the human nature thing, intelligent people, hopefully, are we nasty people?
No, of course not. Look, it's human nature to be more favourable to your own family, your own community. That's just human nature. Obviously, the people who are closer to you, that you know more of, you're going to, you will be prejudiced towards them. Everybody's like that, whether you're black or white or Chinese or Arab, you would see exactly the same sort of traits all around the world. I mean, because we're sort of tribal in nature. It's just human nature. But I mean, this is the argument that people on the progressive liberal left would use. If you are against immigration, you're racist. Well, does that mean that Nigeria's racist because they, why are you not saying to Nigeria, you should take more white people? Why are you not saying to Kenya, you should take more Arab people? Why are you not saying to China, you should take more white people, for example, or more black people? I mean, no one's saying to countries in Asia, the Middle East, Africa, South America, you should have more diversity. It only seems to be countries in Western Europe, Eastern Europe as well now, North America, Australia, and also, Japan and South Korea are getting this as well. There's a lot of pressure on those countries to diversify because they're very, very homogenous. They work very, very well because they've got a common shared culture and understanding. Japan's doing very well. And South Korea, I mean, what an incredible story South Korea's had over the last 30 or 40 years, come from being, very, very poor third world country into being a first world industrial Asian tiger. It's an incredible story. Koreans are incredible people. I mean, I know from being a teacher before I was in politics in some international schools, they really do have an incredible work ethic, and they're an amazing nation, South Korea. But why should they be forced to take on diversity when they don't want to? But there seems that there's certain countries that this agenda's being pushed onto, and they seem to be sort of mostly free capitalist countries, which are democracies, because it does, breaks down social cohesion when you have very, very quick change, which people can't cope with, and it's not a healthy thing. And we need to say that, and it's not what people want. Unless you walk in globalist circles where you're not affected by it, and you think, oh, I'm up here and I'm benefiting from this, but the people who aren't as privileged as the sort of people who are implementing it, they get left to pick up the pieces. And it's wrong to do that to people.
David, I'm going to be closing very shortly. I want to take some comments. I've been very useless with the comments tonight, people. You have been welcome to call in, and still are, if you want to call in quickly. And if you go to dailychaos.news/show, there's a button, and if you click on it, and if you've got Zoom, you can come straight through. Shan Tiggs, democratic law states that any person in a position of trust must date back 3 generations of being born in the UK. So why did Khan and Javid have their jobs? Their parents came in 1969. David, what is your ancestry, sir, because you know what? I don't give a damn what colour you are. I really don't care. I care what's on up there, what's going on there, and what's going on in there, and that's it. But you do have some colour, sir. So what is your ancestry, and what would you say to Shantigs, who does make a point?
Yeah, I mean, my ancestry is very mixed. I mean, my mother was white, and my father was black, who's from Jamaica. But then, you know, somewhere along that side, there was some Swiss as well, and then no, so there was some German, and on my mother's side, there was also some Swiss. So I mean, I'm very, very mixed.
Kurten. Kurten is a German name with that spelling.
It is a German name, yeah. So somewhere like my father's father's father, or somewhere along the line, was German.
So you are a mix.
Yeah.
So he's got a point. Shantigs has got a point there, hasn't he? I do understand that is UK law. Any person in a position of trust, Chancellor of the Exchequer, for example, or Mayor of London, must date back 3 generations of being born in the UK. We seem to have just ignored that law
before. And what did you say it was called?
I don't know what the law is called, to be honest with you, and Shan doesn't mention it here, but it is hundreds of years old. It's an ancient law, which we are ignoring these days, rightly or wrongly. Libelle, I don't think it's too late. These Marxists have to be told where the hammer is hanging. It's up to the people. If they comply, they'll lose their freedoms. Libelle, question please. Would it not be possible to outlaw Marxist organisations? Contender for the mayorship, sir.
I think that's a very good idea, but you know, you've got to balance that with freedom of speech. You know, everyone's got the right to say what they want, provided that they're not inciting violence or inciting criminal activity. So, you know, I completely disagree with Marxism, but, you know, I wouldn't say that you shouldn't be allowed. You should be banned from saying what you got to say if you want to say that. But what we do have to do is stand up against it, because the reason that Marxists have taken over, almost all cultural Marxists, neo-Marxists have taken over, is because they've had very little resistance, and people have been afraid to stand up, and they are bullies, many of them. You know, people are being bullied out of their jobs. They're being dragged through the courts. They're being harassed by the police for saying the wrong things. And we've got to stand up to the bullies. And that may mean that more of us get into trouble. And it may mean that we don't have a quiet life. But you know what? You're not going to have a quiet life in the end if we don't stand up to them. And you know, it's a really important point. I think this maybe is the most important point, you know, more important than anything I've said before, is that, you know, the silent majority, you know, people from the silent majority, whatever you might say, I get so much support from people saying, we agree with everything you've said, it's wonderful, we love what you say, thank you, keep on doing it, but will not raise their head above the parapet, because there are millions of people who agree and think that what's happening in the country is crazy, but don't want harm to come their way, because Marxists are bullies. But you've got to stand up. England, Britain, you've got to roar. You are lions, and you've got to roar like lions. Otherwise, the Marxists are going to come and kill you and take away all of your freedom. I mean, maybe metaphorically. I don't mean they're going to literally kill you.
I don't know.
Not.
I wonder.
This has happened before. You know, it happened in Nazi Germany. It happened in Bolshevik Russia. It happened in Mao's China. And you know, how many Nazis were there? I don't know how many people were in the Nazi party. 2 million, 3 million, I'm not sure. And you have so many good Germans. They didn't like what was going on, but they thought, oh, well, I'm not going to make my stand here. Hopefully it'll all go away. It's not going to go away. So, you know, Britain, if you're watching this, you've got to stand up and you've got to shout and roar, and you've got to take these Marxists down. Otherwise, they're going to take you down.
How much?
I mean, I hope that's not too
No,
strongly to put,
David,
we gotta
appreciate
start
that.
standing up to these people.
Appreciate that passion. How much are these Marxists, or these ignorant Marxists, I would say, in many cases, quite frankly, because I don't think many people really know who they are politically until they're at least the age of 30, frankly. And so I wonder how many of these Marxists are actually puppets to fascists.
So many, I think, are useful idiots. You know, will want to go out on the street and maybe they're, you know, young, whatever, and you know, they want to be part of something. You know, I've been up to watch the Black Lives Matter demonstrations, and you know, I've seen some of the people who are leaders, and you know, they do genuinely believe that this country is evil, whatever, or they want to destroy the fabric of society and change it and burn it to the ground, you know, and put up something else. They're never going to put up anything because all they know how to do is destroy things. But there's a lot of people who just follow on because, you know, it's a nice music and they want to experience something and they get caught up in the atmosphere, you know, but you know, it's the sort of left, you see how they can mobilize thousands and tens of thousands of people on the streets of London. You know, you had the Ramona the parade that went on, you've got the Black Lives Matter parade, and it was so much bigger than the sort of anti, you know, mass demonstration and so in terms of numbers of people. So they're very, very good at getting people out on the streets. But the number of people who are in the silent majority who are just watching and thinking, I don't like this, is far, far bigger. But, you know, conservatives don't generally go out on the streets and make a big noise because we're happy. We love our country and we think it's a good country and there's nothing really to protest about. We just want it to go on as it is and enjoy the country and enjoy our heritage and pass it on to our children and grandchildren. But there comes a time when you've actually got to start speaking up, you know, and it might not, it's not talking about maybe going out on the streets, but just it's really hard to do this because, you know, people who speak up are going to get comeback. You know, for example, if you're a teacher and you're told that you have to accept transgenderism, you know, and there's a girl in your class who says they're a boy and you've got to affirm that. You know, the right thing to do is not to affirm that. If someone's got gender dysphoria, they're either going through a phase because, you know, kids go through phases and they try things out. It's just part of growing up. But you've got the LGBT activists want to say, oh, they're not going through a phase. They are a transgender person. We need to stuff them full of hormones and cut bits of their body off. You know, whereas like 90% of people who have gender dysphoria as teenagers grow out of it. So if you're a teacher, you know, and someone says, you have to affirm that, you know, you have to agree with this, it's a really hard thing to do, to stand up and say, no, I don't. This is wrong. There are boys and there are girls. There are males and females, and you can't change between one or the other. You know, you might get a lot of stick for saying that, which is crazy because 5 years ago, everyone would just think that's normal. But, you know, I think people have got to start standing up and saying this kind of thing. Even, you know, like J.K. Rowling, you know, I'm no fan of J.K. Rowling because she's right in the vanguard of toxic Me Too feminism. But on this issue, she's actually now, you know, stood up on the trans issue and she's on the right side of that.
Yeah, I think so.
And she's got like so many people like, wow, at last someone is saying what we all think. And she's got so much stick. But, you know, she can't do it alone. You can't just leave it to one person, 2 person, 10 people who are in the public eye. It's got to be millions of people. Millions of people have got to stand up and say, we're not having this. Otherwise, you know, they're just going to march all over it without any resistance.
I've got 3 final questions. I've been so dreadful with the comments, and my questions are pulled from the comments, people, but I really do apologise. David, I do hope you'll come back on soon at some stage, because there are so many questions and you say some things that are very fascinating to hear from a politician, and the sort of things that I think we widely would like to hear politicians discussing more broadly. First of all, regarding an English Parliament, asks Kenneth Noel Gabriel Curran, for the English people in a united Christian kingdom. Now, we see the likes of, what's his name, Blackstone, Ian Blackmore in the Commons, Ian Blackford, going on about Scotland, and frankly, sounding pretty racist. It seems to me.
Yeah.
But I just, whenever I hear this kind of rhetoric, I'm thinking, well, there's the English people are sponsoring your parliament when they haven't even got their own. How much more should that be a part of the national debate?
Yeah, it's a really tough question, because Tony Blair messed everything up with the devolution agenda, and the original plan was to split England into 9 different regions. This was to go along with the EU's plan. So they actually tried to put in a regional assembly in the northeast, and the people voted it down. They didn't want it. But, Wales voted for something by a hair's breadth. I think it was like 50.1% in favour of a Welsh assembly. But now you got the situation where England doesn't have a parliament, the other bits do, and so we're left out. Look, if it stays as it is, the only way to make it fair is to have an English parliament. But it's not what I'm really in favour of, to be honest, because I think, would be better to undo Tony Blair's devolution, and so that we reunite as a nation again with a parliament in Westminster. But, whether the genie of devolution can be put back in the bottle, I don't know. Because really, if you believe in democracy, well, if that's Scotland wants a parliament, then they should have a parliament. But in which case England should have one as well. But it's such a difficult question, because the ramifications for things are, England would be so much bigger than the other parts of the UK, and then all of the, where would it be? Most of if you had an English Parliament, most of the function of Westminster would be transferred to the English Parliament, because all of the sort of public services, education, health, environment, social security, etc., would all go to the English Parliament. There wouldn't be much left for the national Parliament to do. And then you sort of have to elect a whole other set of MPs, or members of the English Parliament. You'd have like another 400 odd bureaucrats in there, each with their office and their staff. That would cost an awful lot of money. So to be honest, I think it would be better to reverse the devolution that Tony Blair did, and reverse his changes. Whether that's possible or not, I don't know.
The Heritage Party, just briefly, please. Tell me about that.
What's the Heritage Party? Who's asking the Heritage Party?
I was looking at your bio earlier, and it came up and said that you'd set up this party called the Heritage Party. Yeah. On Wikipedia.
Well, okay, you're sort of catching me on the hoof there, aren't you? The Heritage Party.
So,
look, I said at the beginning, I was thinking about setting up a new political party. So I haven't made any announcement yet, and I'm not planning to make an announcement today. But I have set something. I've done some groundwork on setting up a new party. So
you wouldn't team up.
That's all I'm going to say about it at the moment.
Oh, fair enough. But
there will be more announcements to come.
you wouldn't team up with the Reform Party if Nigel Farage set that up.
Well, I don't know what's happening with that. So I've just got to wait and see. What might happen in that sphere.
Do you think that UKIP is entirely dead?
Well, it's still going as an entity, but it's essentially just full of people who are fighting like rats in a sack, and they're some more keen on fighting each other than fighting elections. So I stayed in, hoping that it could somehow, pick itself up and be what I'd always hoped it would be, which could be a properly socially conservative party, which would be in opposition to the fake Conservative Party. But I just came to a point where I thought it's just too far gone. So
do you think the NEC played fair with Gerard Batten and Richard Brain?
I was on the NEC for 3 months, and it was only a very short time. So I mean, I'm not really too much, I don't know too much about all the sort of meetings and things that the NEC had. But I mean, I'm out of it now. So and I'm not happier. Actually.
No sitting on the fence. No sitting on the fence.
I'm sitting on the fence. I'm giving you a politician's answer. You're very good. Because,
you are. But it's about the first one that you've given me, which was a politician's answer. So
I think there's some things that it's best not to comment on, to be honest, because it's all, I've left and they've left it behind. Very, very sad to leave it behind, because I was in UKIP for 7 years. Yeah. And, it was 4 wonderful years where we were winning, won the referendum and so on. And then you saw the slow decline, and I think it's got about...
There's a lot of politically homeless off the back of that.
There's so many people who are politically homeless. And, there's an absolute clamour for something. I know people want a real, truly conservative party.
Yes. Small C. Small C
Conservatives. Yeah, exactly. I know there's so many people that want this. So many people tell me that they're politically homeless. So look, I'm not making any announcement now. You caught me on the hoof there by mentioning the Heritage Party, but
Good.
I'm working on something. And so I will be making an announcement at some point over the next few weeks.
David Kurten, running for London Mayor. God bless you, sir. Knock him off his perch, please. So says all of us. We had Kelvin Mackenzie on a couple of weeks ago, and he's got a single out. He's got a Rod Stewart cover. So you're gonna have to get in the studio and do some singing, sir. Yeah, lovely bloke.
I've got to have my game, haven't I?
yeah. There you go. Yeah, get your tonsils out. Big cheers, David Kurten. Thank you very much indeed, sir. Thank you. That's it. Daily Chaos for today. That's it. See you tomorrow.
Okay, cheers, man. Yeah.
Big cheers, David. Big cheers. And yeah, I don't know. Was I a bit crap in the comments? I probably was a bit crap in the comments. But then again, you were a bit crap on the call-ins too. So, you know what? Touche turtle. But thank you, everybody, for your comments. And I hope I covered the main points. I hope I did. Yeah, I obviously didn't. It's just... yeah, check it out. What's going on? There's so much going on. So look, I'll see you tomorrow. I got no idea what's going on tomorrow, to be honest with you. But 9 o'clock UK time. I'll see you then. Look, this show is now Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday, 9 p.m. UK time. I've been the Thursday because I figured better to have slightly less shows and slightly more quality. And beside which, I got to finish doing some stuff on dailychaos.news, like the homepage, yeah? Great thing! Great! It's gonna be great! So get over there and register. Sign up for the newsletters, dailychaos.news. And I'll see you tomorrow, 9 o'clock UK time, 4 EDT. 4 p.m. EDT. Mr. President, yeah, come in, call in, tell us what's going on. When are you going to lock her up? See you tomorrow. Here's to us. And bugger plutocracy.